The World Cup is in motion and Newcastle stars are shining. So from the Elanga reminder, to Newcastle eyeing a Brighton star, to Newcastle given a chance to sign a former target.
Me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect.
We'll also discuss the details regarding Newcastle's position amid Tottenham's interest in Tonali. As per, join us as we'll break it all down and discuss the latest Newcastle United transfer news.
Let's go!
And some World Cup updates. Anthony Elanga finally gave Newcastle United fans a glimpse of the player they thought they were signing when he found the net for Sweden during their World Cup clash against the Netherlands. The Swedish winger endured a hugely frustrating first season at St James Park, following his £55 million move from Nottingham Forest. Expectations were high after his impressive campaign at Forest, but consistency, end product and overall performances were often lacking throughout the season. That is why his display against the Netherlands will have caught the attention of Newcastle supporters. Although Sweden were comfortably beaten 5-1, Elanga emerged as one of the few positives for his side. Introduced from the bench in the second half, he scored Sweden's only goal after timing his run perfectly to latch onto an excellent pass from Alexander Isak before calmly finishing beyond goalkeeper Bart Verbruggen. It was the type of goal Newcastle fans were hoping to see regularly when the club invested so heavily in the winger. More encouraging than the goal itself was his overall performance. Operating predominantly from the right flank but frequently drifting into central areas, Elanga consistently caused problems for the Dutch defence with his direct running and pace. He completed every dribble he attempted, delivered 6 passes into the final third, and looked far more confident in possession than he often did during his club campaign. The performance served as a reminder of why Newcastle pursued him for so long before finally securing his signature. The frustrating aspect for supporters is that the quality has always been there. Elanga showed it at Nottingham Forest and has now shown it again on the international stage. The challenge has been translating those performances into consistent displays in black and white. Confidence may have played a significant role. Players who struggle early in a new environment can sometimes become hesitant, overthinking decisions that previously came naturally. Against the Netherlands, Elanga looked liberated, willing to take risks and attack defenders with conviction. That version of Elanga is the one Newcastle need next season. With Anthony Gordon having departed and questions remaining over several attacking positions, Eddie Howe will need players to step up. If Elanga can carry his World Cup form into pre-season, Newcastle may yet discover that the player they paid £55 million for has been there all along. His goal against the Netherlands will not suddenly erase a disappointing debut season, but it does offer a timely reminder that talent is not the issue. Now the challenge is consistency. Sweden's final group game against Japan presents another opportunity for Elanga to build momentum, and Newcastle fans will be watching closely. After a difficult year, a strong World Cup could be exactly what he needs heading into a crucial second season on Tyneside. For all the criticism he has received, performances like this explain why so many people still believe there is a top player waiting to emerge. If Newcastle can unlock that version of Anthony Elanga on a regular basis, the narrative around him could change very quickly. Then, Newcastle United have reportedly sent a clear message to Tottenham Hotspur regarding Sandro Tonali's future after swiftly rejecting an opening offer for the Italian midfielder. According to Sky Sports reporter Keith Downey, Tottenham submitted a proposal worth around £75 million plus add-ons last week. Newcastle wasted little time in turning it down. The rejection underlines Newcastle's stance throughout the summer. While the club may be willing to listen to offers for almost any player at the right price, they are under no pressure to sell Tonali and will only consider a deal on their own terms. Current reports suggest Newcastle value the 26-year-old at somewhere between £90 million and £100 million. The Daily Mail believes the figure is closer to the £100 million mark, although Tottenham are reportedly not discouraged by the initial rejection and discussions remain ongoing. The interest is hardly surprising. Despite an up-and-down campaign, Tonali remains one of the most accomplished midfielders at the club and still possesses the qualities that convinced Newcastle to spend £55 million to sign him from AC Milan. His ability to dictate tempo, win possession and contribute in both defensive and attacking phases makes him an attractive target for clubs looking to strengthen the centre of the pitch. Tottenham's interest is also understandable given Roberto De Zerbi's reported admiration for the player. The two share roots in Brescia, and De Zerbi is believed to see Tonali as a cornerstone of his long-term project in North London. Manchester City are also said to be monitoring developments. However, City's immediate focus reportedly remains on Nottingham Forest midfielder Elliot Anderson. Only if that pursuit proves unsuccessful could they potentially intensify their interest in Tonali. From Newcastle's perspective, the situation presents a difficult balancing act. On one hand, losing Tonali would remove one of the club's most talented players at a time when stability is desperately needed following Anthony Gordon's departure. Replacing a midfielder of his caliber would be far from straightforward. On the other hand, a fee approaching £100 million would represent a remarkable return on investment. Newcastle paid £55 million for Tonali, and despite the disruption caused by his lengthy suspension, would still be looking at a profit of around £40. £45 million while having benefited from several seasons of service. In pure financial terms, it would be an outstanding piece of business. The bigger question is what happens next. Selling stars only works if the recruitment team successfully reinvests the money. Newcastle supporters have already endured the frustration of missing out on Victor Munoz after appearing to have a deal wrapped up, and competition for top targets is only likely to intensify. That means Ross Wilson and the recruitment department may soon face their biggest challenge yet. If Tonali leaves, Newcastle would not only need to replace one of their best midfielders, but also convince elite talents that St James Park remains the right destination despite missing out on European football. For now, Newcastle's position appears firm. Tonali is not for sale at £75 million. Whether Tottenham are willing to return with an offer closer to £100 million could determine whether this becomes one of the biggest transfer stories of the summer. However, in another update, Newcastle United's reported interest in Brighton midfielder Yacine Ayari is certainly an interesting one, but at this stage it feels more like a situation the club is keeping an eye on, rather than a deal they are actively pursuing. The 22-year-old enjoyed a breakthrough campaign at Brighton last season, making 29 Premier League appearances and contributing 3 goals and 3 assists. While those numbers are not spectacular, they reflect a player who has steadily grown into top-flight football and shown enough quality to attract attention from some of Europe's biggest clubs. Ayari also started his World Cup campaign brightly for Sweden, scoring twice in a 5-1 victory over Tunisia. Although Sweden were heavily beaten by the Netherlands in their second match, his performances have continued to enhance his reputation on the international stage. What makes this rumor noteworthy is the caliber of clubs reportedly monitoring him. Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Atletico Madrid, and AC Milan have all been linked, suggesting Newcastle would face fierce competition if they decide to move beyond simple scouting. The contract situation is another factor. Ayari has only 1 year remaining on his Brighton deal, which would normally place buyers in a strong negotiating position. However, Brighton have built a reputation for extracting maximum value from their assets, and Tony Bloom's club are unlikely to allow a talented young international to leave cheaply. From Newcastle's perspective, the timing of the links is interesting given the uncertainty surrounding Sandro Tonali. Should Tonali remain at St James Park, midfield is probably not the area requiring the most urgent attention. Newcastle already have Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, Tonali, Lewis Miley, and several other options available. In that scenario, Ayari would likely be viewed as an opportunity rather than a necessity. If Tonali leaves, however, the situation changes dramatically. Losing the Italian would create a significant hole in Eddie Howe's midfield, both in terms of quality and balance. Newcastle would suddenly need another high-level central midfielder, and Ayari's profile as a technically gifted, energetic and versatile player would become far more appealing. For now, though, the key phrase is that Newcastle are reportedly monitoring him. There is a big difference between monitoring a player and actively negotiating a transfer. Clubs track dozens of players every window, especially younger talents whose situations may develop over time. Ayari fits Newcastle's recruitment model in many ways. He is young, has Premier League experience, possesses international pedigree, and still has considerable room for development. The challenge is that Newcastle would likely need to convince him to choose Tyneside over several clubs who can currently offer European football, and in some cases, title challenges. At this moment, it feels like a move that remains firmly in the background. But if Sandro Tonali's future takes a decisive turn, don't be surprised if Newcastle's interest in Yassin Ayari quickly becomes much more serious. Then, in another development, Newcastle United have reportedly been handed a potential opportunity to sign Chelsea striker Liam Delap this summer.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Although any move is unlikely to come cheaply. Chelsea paid £30 million to sign Delap from Ipswich Town last summer after the young forward impressed, despite Ipswich's relegation from the Premier League. His 12-goal campaign attracted interest from several clubs, but Chelsea ultimately won the race for his signature. Things have not gone according to plan since then. The 23-year-old endured a difficult first season at Stamford Bridge and struggled to establish himself as a consistent attacking threat. As a result, speculation surrounding his future has already begun. According to reports, Chelsea would now demand at least £40 million to sell Delap, with Newcastle and Everton both monitoring the situation. From Newcastle's perspective, the interest makes some sense. Following Alexander Isak's departure and Nick's inconsistent first season, Eddie Howe is believed to be keen on adding another striker capable of competing for a regular starting role. Delap would offer a very different profile. Strong, aggressive, and comfortable playing with his back to goal, he remains highly regarded despite his struggles at Chelsea. At 23, there is still plenty of room for development, and many observers believe he possesses the raw attributes needed to become a top Premier League striker. The question is whether he represents good value at £40 million. Chelsea's asking price would already represent a £10 million profit on a player who has just endured a disappointing season. Newcastle would need to be convinced that Delap's difficult year was more a product of circumstances than limitations in his game. There may also be another obstacle. Former Liverpool and England midfielder Danny Murphy believes incoming Chelsea manager Xabi Alonso could decide to keep Delap and assess him personally before allowing any transfer discussions to progress. That viewpoint is understandable. New managers often prefer to evaluate players themselves before sanctioning departures, especially when dealing with young talents who still possess significant upside. For now, Delap appears to be one of several striker options Newcastle could consider as they continue rebuilding their attack. Whether the Magpies are willing to meet Chelsea's valuation remains to be seen. But with proven Premier League goal scorers becoming increasingly expensive, a 23-year-old striker with Delap's potential is unlikely to come much cheaper. As things stand, Newcastle's interest appears genuine, but Chelsea's willingness to sell may ultimately be the factor that determines whether this develops into something more concrete. However, for me, Newcastle United's reported interest in Matthias Mané is exactly the sort of move that fits the club's recent recruitment strategy under Ross Wilson. The 18-year-old enjoyed a breakthrough campaign despite Wolves' disastrous season, registering 3 goals and 2 assists in 27 Premier League appearances for a side that ultimately finished bottom of the table and suffered relegation. For a teenager playing in one of the weakest teams in the division, those numbers are actually quite encouraging. The latest reports suggest Mané is unhappy following Wolves' relegation and the surprise dismissal of Rob Edwards, the manager who handed him his opportunity in the first team. That combination of factors could create an opening for interested clubs such as Newcastle and Borussia Dortmund. Newcastle's inquiry reportedly appears to be at an early stage, with contact made to assess Wolves' valuation rather than launch a formal bid. The reported £30 million asking price would certainly force Newcastle to think carefully before proceeding. There is no doubt that Mané is talented. Despite only turning 18, he quickly became one of Wolves' brightest performers last season. His ability to operate as an attacking midfielder while also drifting into wider positions gives him versatility that Eddie Howe typically values highly. However, there is a significant difference between being a promising player in a struggling side and being ready to contribute immediately for a club with Newcastle's ambitions. That is perhaps the biggest question surrounding this potential move. At Newcastle, Mané would not arrive as a guaranteed starter. He would be competing with established Premier League players and would likely need time to develop before becoming a regular first-team option. For that reason, a £30 million fee feels quite steep for a player who remains largely unproven at the highest level. That said, Newcastle have already shown a willingness to invest heavily in young talent with long-term potential. The signings of Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento, and now Ewan Yawen demonstrate a clear focus on acquiring players before they fully explode in value. Maine would fit that profile perfectly. The fact that Borussia Dortmund are also reportedly interested is another indicator of how highly he is regarded. Dortmund's recruitment record with young players is among the best in Europe, and they rarely pursue prospects without seeing significant upside. From Wolves' perspective, they will be desperate to keep hold of him. Relegation has already created uncertainty around the squad, and losing one of their brightest academy products would be another major blow. They will likely point to the Championship as a platform where Mane can play regularly and continue his development without the pressure of a huge transfer. The player's own feelings may ultimately decide everything. If he truly wants an immediate return to the Premier League and feels the managerial change has altered his future at Wolves, Newcastle could find themselves in a strong position. For now, though, this feels more like a situation to monitor rather than a transfer that is close to completion. The talent is obvious, the interest appears genuine, and the circumstances at Wolves may create an opportunity. The question Newcastle must answer is whether Mateus is worth £30 million today, or whether that money would be better spent on a player who can make an immediate impact on Eddie Howe's first team. As a long-term investment, he looks extremely exciting. As a player expected to help Newcastle climb back towards the top end of the Premier League straight away, there are still plenty of unanswered questions. Then if you would like to know the exciting winger Newcastle have begun talks to sign, click the video link on screen now.